I was the other daughter. That's how it always felt. Not the golden child. Not the pride and joy, just the other one. The shadow that followed my sister into every room, only to be forgotten when the door closed. If you're the other one, you know what I mean? You grow up learning how to shrink yourself, so the silence doesn't feel so loud. My sister, Liliano, she was dazzling. Straight A's, piano recitals in pressed dresses, flawless smiles for every family portrait. The kind of girl teachers adored and relatives bragged about. The kind of girl who was handed the sun and still told she deserved more stars. And then, there was me, Rachel, the quiet one, the creative one, the one who made messes with words and dreams instead of following a neat path carved out in honor rolls and internships. I was a walking sigh to my mother, a passing glance to my father, a disappointment cloaked in politeness. I remember birthdays like they were rituals of comparison. Lillian would get a new bicycle with a pink bow. I once got socks and a maybe next year when I asked for art supplies. It wasn't that they didn't have the means, they just didn't see me as worth investing in. And that belief, it sank in deep. Do you know what it's like to live in a house where your existence is tolerated, not cherished? Where every conversation at the dinner table somehow circles back to your siblings' accomplishments. Where the only time your name is mentioned is to ask why you aren't more like her. I do, and the worst part. You start believing it. You start believing that maybe you really are less. But let me tell you something about being invisible. It teaches you to observe everything. You learn to listen between the lines. You hear the disappointment your parents don't say out loud. You catch the look your mother gives when you walk in with another short story draft instead of a college application to law school. You notice when your father praises your sister's science award and doesn't even ask about your poetry competition win. At 13, I stopped expecting them to come to my school events. At 15, I stopped telling them about them. At 17, I stopped talking altogether at the dinner table. Lillian got into Stanford. The whole neighborhood knew. There was a party, balloons, a cake with her name in cursive and gold sprinkles. When I got into a local community college with a partial scholarship for creative writing, my mother said, "That's cute." Cute, like a toddler's doodle. Like something you put on the fridge and forget to glance at. I went anyway. Worked weekends at the bookstore to pay what the scholarship didn't cover. Lived off instant noodles and secondhand notebooks. But every night, I wrote stories, essays, scripts, anything to give voice to the things I'd never been allowed to say. No one cared what I was doing. That gave me freedom. And maybe that's what saved me. Because when no one's watching, you get to build yourself, without interference. You fail quietly. You grow privately. You sharpen your voice in the dark so one day, it'll be bright enough to burn. Lillian graduated with honors and a job offer before her cap even hit the ground. I got published in a small, literary magazine that paid me in contributors' copies. I stared at that first byline for hours, not because anyone else would notice, but because it felt like someone, somewhere, had finally said, "You exist. You matter." I framed it, hung it above my desk in my one-bedroom apartment. My sanctuary of ink and paper. My invisible rebellion. I didn't tell my family. I stopped trying to make them proud when I realized their pride was never meant for me. Still, some nights I wondered what if they just didn't know how to love me. What if I was asking for oranges from a tree that only bore apples? I tried, once. I mailed them a copy of my second publication. Wrote a note inside the front cover. In case you ever wondered what I've been doing. They never mentioned it. At our next family dinner Easter, I think my mother spent 20 minutes talking about how Lillian's new firm had offices in 4 countries. She turned to me briefly and said, "Still doing that writing thing?" As if I were knitting sweaters for imaginary pets. I nodded, smiled politely, poured myself more wine, and kept my secrets to myself. It was easier that way, because every time I opened up, their silence felt like rejection. And rejection, when it comes from the people who made you, feels like being unmade all over again. But I kept going, quietly, relentlessly, writing, submitting, rewriting, failing, writing, again, no spotlight, no applause, just me, and the voice I was stitching together from the broken pieces they left behind. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was survival. But you wouldn't understand that, unless you've been the other daughter too. It's strange, isn't it, how silence can be louder than shouting? Especially in a family dinner, where laughter clinks off wine glasses and everyone's talking over each other, but somehow, no one's talking to you. That's how every holiday felt. I'd show up because I was still trying to prove I was worthy of a chair at the table. But once I sat down, I'd slowly realize I wasn't truly seen there. The conversations were the same. My sister's work. Her fiancé Harvard Law. The next big thing she was doing that would make my parents beam and nod. And sip their wine like they'd personally orchestrated her success. I'd be asked to pass the salt or slice the pie. But never about my life. Not really at one point during Christmas. I mentioned casually that a short story of mine had been nominated for a regional writing prize. Not a big thing, just a local award. But for me, it was everything, a moment of validation. My mother blinked, sipped her tea, and said, "That's lovely, dear. Did you hear Lillian might be getting transferred to London?" It was like my voice had never left my throat, so I stopped volunteering anything. I built my life like a quiet cathedral, layer by layer, word by word, no trumpets, no fanfare, just sacred work. I graduated with honors. They didn't come to the ceremony. To be fair, they didn't know. I didn't tell them, because by then, I'd learned that giving them a chance to ignore me hurt more than keeping them in the dark. After college, I wrote late into the night and pitched stories to anyone who'd listen. Sometimes, I worked 3 side jobs: dog walking, proofreading, waitressing. I did what I had to. I was building something. And brick by quiet brick. It started working. An essay of mine got picked up by a national magazine, then another. Then I was contacted by a small production company. They wanted to adapt one of my stories into a short film. I remember the email. I stared at it for an hour before responding. My hands shook. It wasn't just the recognition, it was the sense that someone, finally, saw what I was trying to say. Then came the call from a daytime television producer. They were doing a special on emerging American storytellers and wanted me as a featured guest. That moment. That was the pivot. I sat in the green room at the studio, watching the crew bustle around. Makeup artists brushing powder over my cheeks. Someone pinning a mic to my collar. And I thought, God, if only they could see me now. Not for revenge, not for validation, but because, for the first time, I was proud of myself in a way that had nothing to do with them. The interview aired the following week. They showed clips of my short film, excerpts from my essays, photos from my readings and book signings. I spoke about resilience, invisibility, and finding your voice in the margins. The segment ended with the host saying, "Rachel Morgan is a rising voice in American literature, proof that even the quietest stories can leave the loudest echoes." That line stuck with me. My inbox exploded afterward. Editors, agents, strangers, thanking me for putting into words what they'd never been able to say. I sat on my tiny couch, holding my phone like it was some holy object. Then my sister called. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. She didn't even say hello. "Mom and Dad saw you on TV. Just that." I waited for more. For some kind of reaction. Instead, she added, "They didn't know what to say." I could imagine it. My mother clutching her mug of tea, my father furrowing his brow. Trying to fit this version of me into the daughter-shaped mold they'd cast long ago. It didn't fit. I didn't fit. And that was okay. Lillian continued. "I watched the whole thing. You were incredible." There was something in her voice, maybe admiration, maybe confusion, maybe both. "Then, why didn't you tell me you were doing all that?" I could have said, "Because you never asked." But I didn't. Because maybe she was finally asking. I told her I didn't think anyone would have cared. There was a long pause. Then she said something I never expected. "I think we messed up." I think I messed up. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. But I felt it, the shifting of something heavy. Something old. Maybe not forgiveness, but space. That night, my mother sent me an email. Short, stilted, carefully typed. "We saw your interview. You looked very polished. We didn't know you were doing so well. I suppose we didn't ask enough." That was it. No apology. No warmth. Just hint of recognition. And for once, that was enough. Because I didn't need it anymore. I had built something without them. And it was beautiful. I printed that email. Framed it. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes, being overlooked is the beginning of something extraordinary. You stop living for their approval, and start living for your own truth. There's a moment after the silence, after the hurt, after the realization that they may never love you the way you need them to, when something inside you breaks, and something stronger begins to grow in its place. It's not revenge, it's not pride, it's something more honest, more sacred, it's liberation. That's what I felt when I walked onto the stage of the National Writers' Symposium that fall. The auditorium lights were like warmth on my face, and for the first time in my life, the applause wasn't for someone else, it was for me. I had been asked to speak on a panel titled Writing Through Erasure, Finding Voice in Silence. As I stepped up to the mic, I wasn't just the girl who was always compared to her sister. I wasn't the one they forgot to take pictures of at family holidays. I wasn't the disappointment in a dusty scrapbook. I was a woman who had survived being dismissed, ignored, overlooked, and who had spun that pain into prose sharp enough to make people feel something. That afternoon, a well-known publishing agent approached me. "We've been following your work," she said, handing me her card. "Your voice is exactly what this generation needs." I stood there blinking, stunned. Not just because of her words, but because my first instinct was still to think, me. It took years to undo that reflex, to believe that I was worthy of taking up space, of being heard without raising my hand. That night, in my tiny apartment, I wrote a story called The Other Sister. It was fiction, but laced with so much truth it ached. The main character, a girl named Mara, was constantly told she was too much, not enough, a handful, a failure. And yet, she carved a kingdom out of rejection. She built a palace of words, with no need for permission to enter. I submitted it. 3 weeks later, I got an email. "We'd like to publish this in our upcoming issue and feature it on our homepage." I cried. Not because of the publication, but because I no longer needed it to believe in myself. It was just a bonus. Still, success has a way of drawing attention even from those who once ignored you. I got a call from my father one evening. He never calls, ever. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered. "Rachel," he said, like he was trying to sound casual. Like he hadn't just spent 2 decades pretending I was a background character. "I read your story, the one about the sister." A beat. I didn't realize. "You felt that way." I didn't say anything. I didn't owe him comfort. He added, "It was powerful." "Made your mother cry." I almost laughed. Not because I didn't believe him, but because it was so absurdly late, decades late. But I just said, "Thanks." There was a long silence. Then, "We didn't mean to make you feel invisible." I wanted to say, "But you did." I wanted to ask, why was she always the sun, and I always the shadow? But instead, I said something else. "I learned how to see myself. Anyway." He cleared his throat. "We're proud of you." I stared at the ceiling, phone pressed to my ear, the words echoing in a place they had never touched before. Proud. It didn't sting like I thought it would. It felt empty, late, like rain on dry earth that had already turned to stone. I didn't say it back, because pride that has to be earned through pain. It's not love. It's politics. They weren't calling because they loved me. They were calling because the world now did. My name was in places they couldn't ignore anymore. On book jackets. On press releases. On lips of people they watched on television. Suddenly, I mattered because other people said I did. Not because they ever saw it for themselves. And that, in a way, was more painful than being dismissed. But, also, freeing. Because now I knew the truth. Their love was conditional. Their pride was performative, and I no longer needed it. I'd become the woman I needed when I was 12. Or 15. Or 20-1. The one who didn't wait to be chosen. The one who wrote her own damn story and made the world listen. That weekend, I did an interview on a podcast about women in media. The host asked me something I wasn't expecting. "What would you say to your younger self?" And without hesitating, I said, "Stop waiting for them to clap for you. You don't need their hands, you have your own." It felt like truth. Was truth. After the episode aired, I got a message from a listener. She wrote, "I'm the other daughter too. Thank you for putting words to what I never could. I'm finally applying to that art school I always wanted. I'm doing it for me." I read it 5 times. Then 10. That night, I sat at my desk and stared at my framed email from my mother. The one where she'd said she didn't know I was doing so well. I took it down. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need the proof anymore. I was the proof. Success has a strange echo to it. It doesn't sound like you thought it would. It's not the roaring applause. It's not the champagne toasts or the praise in newspapers. Sometimes, it's the quiet click of your apartment door locking behind you after another photo shoot. The silence of an empty hallway where no one waits up. No one asks if you made it home safe. You get everything you wanted, and realize you're still carrying everything you never got. The book came out in early spring, It wasn't a bestseller. Not yet, but it found its way into people's hands. Real people. Women who sent me emails at 2 a.m. saying, "I see myself in these pages." I cried in a coffee shop reading chapter 7. It was the kind of success you couldn't fake. Quiet, deep, honest. I was invited back on national television for a segment about authors redefining American family narratives. My face, my voice, my words, they were everywhere now. And then, my mother invited me to dinner, not a family dinner, just her, just me. I almost didn't go, but part of me still believed in that old ache, that maybe if I showed up just right, this time would be different. She picked a fancy restaurant downtown. She was already seated when I arrived, wearing pearls and lipstick like she was meeting a senator, not her own daughter. "Rachel," she said, standing to kiss my cheek. "You look lovely." It was the first compliment she'd given me in years. We ordered wine. She asked about my book tour. She called it important work. I almost choked. Then, halfway through her salad, she said, carefully, "Your sister's going through a rough time. The firm's laying people off. And, well, I told her she should talk to you." I blinked. "About what?" "She's feeling a bit lost," my mother said. I thought, maybe you could give her advice. You seem to have found your footing. There it was, the shift. The same people who used to pat my head and call me sensitive were now looking at me like I was a life raft. I sipped my wine. Why would she come to me? My mother hesitated. Then she said something that changed everything. "Because you've become the strong one." I wasn't ready for that. It wasn't pride in her voice. It was something closer to resignation, and, maybe regret. "She's been struggling since her engagement ended," my mother continued, "and I suppose we leaned on her too hard, expected too much." I stared at her. "You always acted like she was the capable one." She met my eyes. "That was easier. You were harder to understand." It hit like a wave. They didn't favor her because she was better. They favored her because she was familiar, easy, predictable. I was the one who asked uncomfortable questions, who cried too much, who needed more. They didn't know what to do with that, so they chose her again and again. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. That startled me because I knew how rare it was, how impossible it must have felt in her mouth, like chewing glass. I should have paid more attention. I nodded. I didn't say, "You should have loved me better." She wouldn't have known how. At the end of dinner, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've turned out remarkable," she said. "Truly." I smiled, but inside I thought, no thanks to you, because that was the truth. Everything I had built I built in the cracks left by their neglect. In the silence after every ignored birthday. In the shadow of every holiday where I was handed the camera instead of being in the picture. And now, they were reaching back, trying to rewrite the story, trying to make me the strong one they'd always believed in. But I remembered differently. I remembered the loneliness, the nights crying on the bathroom floor, the jobs that barely paid rent, the dreams that felt too big for someone so easily forgotten. I wasn't born strong. I was made strong by surviving them. After dinner, I walked alone through the city. The spring air was cool, electric. People bustled past me, laughing, smoking, spilling out of bars, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was trying to catch up. I was ahead, not because I was better, but because I had learned to run without applause. That night, I called my sister. She sounded surprised. "Hey, what's up? Mom said you wanted to talk." I said, pause, double quotes. "She said I wanted to talk to you." I laughed. "Guess not." But she didn't hang up. Instead, she said, "Actually, maybe I do." There was a beat of vulnerability I hadn't heard in her voice before. A crack in the armor. "Your book messed me up," she admitted. I waited. I recognized myself in it, and not in a good way. She sighed. I was the golden girl. But that came with a cage. I had to keep being perfect. I envied how free you were. Even when they dismissed you. I was stunned. She'd never said anything like that. I was jealous of me, I said. She laughed softly. You had a spine. I had expectations. I didn't know what to say. But in that moment, something shifted between us. Not erased, not healed, but shifted. I realized we were both victims of the same system. She was the idol. I was the ghost. Neither of us chose our roles. But now, maybe just maybe we could start choosing each other. It was strange, really, how silence could become its own language between sisters. For years, Our relationship had been a mosaic of half smiles and careful avoidance. Birthdays passed with obligatory texts. Holidays with stiff hugs. And behind it all, a quiet war. I resented her for being chosen. She pitied me for being forgotten. Neither of us ever said it out loud, but now, with that one late-night phone call, something cracked. Not in a dramatic way, there were no apologies sobbed through static, but in the subtle way ice begins to melt when the sun hits it just right. She asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. I said yes. We picked a small place near the park. No makeup, no mother watching, just us, sitting across from each other like strangers, trying to remember what it meant to be family. She looked tired. Not physically, but in her eyes. Like someone who'd been carrying the weight of a spotlight for far too long. I read the story twice, she said, stirring her coffee without looking at me. The second time, it hurt more. I nodded. It hurt to write. She glanced up. You were always the one with feelings too big to fit in a room. I didn't understand it when we were kids. I just thought, maybe you liked being difficult. I laughed quietly. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was trying not to disappear. She stared at me. You didn't disappear. You just hid. That landed. She wasn't wrong. After so many years of being talked over, dismissed, told I was too emotional, I learned to retreat. Not just from them, but from myself. I buried everything sharp and bright about me so they wouldn't call it dramatic. But now, I had nothing to lose. You got the spotlight, I said gently. I got the silence. And somehow we both ended up exhausted. She smiled. Bitterly, the spotlight is a prison. Roch, every mistake is broadcast. Every wrinkle, every weight fluctuation. You're not allowed to fall apart. But I was never allowed to come together. We stared at each other for a long time. Years passing between blinks. Finally, she said, I think Mom and Dad set us up to fail. In different ways. They wanted you to shrink and me to shine. And now neither of us knows how to just be. And there it was. The truth we'd both been avoiding. It wasn't just favoritism. It was programming. She was trained to be loved for perfection. I was trained to survive without love. Now, as adults, we were learning how wrong that was. How dangerous it was to tie your self-worth to your usefulness. I don't want us to be those people anymore. I said. She reached for my hand. Me either. It wasn't a full reconciliation. Not yet, but it was real. And real was enough. That spring, I did a TEDx talk. Not because I needed more recognition, but because I finally had something to say, something I believed might help someone else claw their way out of the same hole I had. I titled it, You Were Never Too Much, Learning to Take Up Space. It went viral. People shared it across forums, therapy groups, classrooms. They wrote to me, strangers from all over the world, saying, thank you for giving me permission to stop apologizing for existing. But the message that gutted me came from someone much closer, my father. He sent an email. I watched your talk. Twice. I don't know how to make peace with who I was to you. I don't know if I deserve to. But if I could go back, I'd listen more. I'd love better. I'm proud of you, Rachel. Not because the world is finally seeing you, but because you made them. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't forward it to anyone. I just saved it. Not as proof. Not as closure, but as a marker. Because once I would have given anything for those words. Now, I didn't need them, but I could receive them. That's growth. That's grace. Summer came, and with it, a new opportunity. A nonprofit that empowers young girls in under-resourced communities asked me to be a mentor and guest speaker. They'd read The Other Sister. They said it gave their girls language for the feelings they'd been punished for. I went. I spoke. I listened. One of the girls, a 16-year-old with a notebook full of poetry and a bruise on her voice, said, I thought being invisible was just how life works. But now I want to be seen. I held her hand and said, then, write like it's already true. Because it is. In the months that followed, I created a writing workshop called Room for Her, open to anyone who had ever been silenced, overlooked, dismissed, erased. It filled up in hours. I read stories that made me weep. Stories that reminded me I wasn't alone. I'd never been. I was just the first to speak, and now others were speaking, too, and that was the real win. Not the book deals, not the talk shows, but the ripple, the proof that one voice once drowned could become a wave strong enough to carry others home. It wasn't fame I wanted, it was freedom. But sometimes, they come tangled together in unexpected ways. The year after the TEDx talk, things snowballed. Suddenly, I wasn't just an author. I was a speaker, a mentor, a panelist, a name people requested at conferences. My inbox flooded with invitations to speak at universities, women's leadership events, media outlets. The same girl who once had to beg her family to come to her first poetry reading was now being flown across the country to talk about reclaiming your voice. But I stayed grounded because I knew what it was like to live without applause, to write for no one, to build worth from scraps, and that kept me real. It also meant I could tell when people were showing up for me, or just for what I could offer them. So when the producers of a major national talk show reached out, one of the biggest morning shows in the country hesitated. They said they wanted to do a special spotlight on women who had redefined success on their own terms. I was flattered, of course, but part of me bristled, because I knew what those segments could become. Glossy, simplified, edited down to fit a commercial break. My story wasn't clean. It was jagged and bruised and real, but I said yes, because if even a sliver of that story made it through the part about being the forgotten sibling, the part about building something out of silence, maybe it could reach someone who needed it. What I didn't expect was this. The producers wanted to film in my hometown. They wanted B-roll of where I grew up, footage of my old high school, maybe even an interview with a family member. They wanted the whole full circle narrative. And of course, they reached out to my parents. I didn't stop them. Not because I needed validation, but because I needed to see something. I needed to know what they would say when the lights came on. And the story they had buried was about to become public record. They agreed to be interviewed. I watched the raw cut of their segment 2 days before my flight. I sat on my couch, heart thudding, as the footage played. My mother looked small, polished, yes, but diminished somehow, like she had spent years trying to hold a script that no longer worked. She said, "Rachel was always emotional. She felt things deeper than we understood." I think, in hindsight, we didn't meet her where she was. My father added, "We saw her sister as the easy one. Rachel always challenged us. We mistook that for defiance instead of brilliance." They used words like regret, like pride, but it was the pause before each sentence that spoke louder, the way they had to search for the right words, because the story they told themselves for decades was unraveling, and the world was watching. The producers wanted us to appear together. Some beautiful reconciliation arc. A shot of us hugging. Tears, maybe. But I said no. I told them I'd be happy to speak about my story. But I wasn't interested in performing family for the camera, because forgiveness isn't content and reconciliation isn't ratings. So I flew in alone. The morning of the segment, I stood backstage, mic clipped to my collar, hair and makeup done, watching the countdown clock on a monitor, and then I heard it. Up next, we meet the woman whose book sparked a national conversation about being the overlooked child. And what happens when the one no one believed in becomes the voice everyone hears? I smiled, not out of ego, but because it was true. And then I walked out under those bright studio lights, into the seat with my name on it, and told the truth, the full truth, not just about the pain but about the survival, not just about being dismissed but about choosing to rise. I talked about boundaries, about building a life outside of approval, about how no amount of achievement will ever heal a childhood wound but self-worth can. And when the host asked, "What would you say to your younger self?" I looked right into the camera and said, "You're not too much. You're just too powerful for people who are afraid of their own smallness." There was a silence in the studio, then applause. After the taping, I walked back to my dressing room and found a note slipped under the door. It was from my sister. I watched it live. "I'm crying. I never understood what it cost you to become who you are. But now I see it. And I want you to know, I'm proud of you. Not because you're famous. Because you never stopped being real." Lee sat on the couch and cried. Not because I was sad, but because I was finally seen, not as a backup singer in my own family. Not as the difficult one, but as myself, whole, unapologetic. Enough, and it was then that I knew. This wasn't just my victory. It was the beginning of something bigger, because when one person breaks the pattern, others find the courage to step forward, too. You know, people always talk about success like it's a clean, shining mountaintop. Like once you get there, everything below disappears, the pain, the doubt, the years spent in shadows. But they don't tell you that when you finally arrive, you carry all of it with you. The difference is, now you're not ashamed of the weight. You've learned how to carry it with grace. After the talk show aired, the messages came in like a tide I wasn't prepared for. Strangers, Yes, but also people from my past. Old teachers, classmates, former bosses. Even the librarian who used to keep a stash of poetry books under the desk just for me. But there was one message I wasn't expecting. It was from Aunt Dolores, my mom's estranged sister. She hadn't been at family holidays for at least 15 years. A whispered scandal. A woman too difficult, too opinionated, too everything. Her message was brief. I always saw you, Rachel. I just didn't have the power to protect you. But I see you now, and I'm glad you've become the woman I always hoped you would. We come from a long line of women told to be quiet. Thank you for breaking that chain. I stared at that message for a long time, because I realized something. The family I thought was one solid block of rejection had fractures. People who had been pushed to the margins, like me. Women like Aunt Dolores, who refused to contort themselves into roles written by someone else. I wasn't the first rebel. I was just the first one with a microphone. I invited her to my next event. She came. She wore red lipstick, silver bangles, that clinked when she clapped, and a look that said, "You didn't just survive, girl, you soared." We went for dinner after. Talked for hours. Laughed like people who shared DNA and war stories, and in that booth, eating garlic fries and sipping ginger ale, I felt something I hadn't felt with family in decades. Ease. There was no tightrope. No performance, just two women who had been made to feel like problems, realizing they had always been the blueprint. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about my childhood bedroom, still intact. My mother had told the producers. Still painted, pale yellow, with floral trim, and the bookshelf I'd filled with borrowed dreams. I hadn't been back there in years, but I wanted to see it, not for nostalgia, for closure. So a week later, I drove to my parents' house. Alone, no cameras, no producers, no press. Just me. I didn't tell them I was coming. I knocked. My mother opened the door. Her expression cracked with something like worry or, maybe, hope. "You're here," she said. "I am." We didn't hug, not yet, but she let me in. The house looked the same beige walls, same sofa, same faint smell of lavender and lemon floor polish. But something felt different, quieter, like it had exhaled. We sat in the kitchen. They asked about my work. I answered politely. They brought up the show. I nodded, but when my dad said, "We didn't know how to be better parents," I stopped him. "Don't rewrite history," I said gently. "You chose her. Again and again. You had chances." He looked down. "I'm not here for apologies," I added. "I'm here because I needed to see this house one last time. As the woman I became without your approval, it wasn't cruel, it was clear." He nodded slowly, and for the first time, I think he really saw me not as the daughter he misunderstood, but as a person who had rebuilt herself from the rubble of their favoritism. I went upstairs. My room was still yellow. The bookshelf was still there, but something was different. On the dresser sat a framed photo of me taken from the morning show, microphone in hand, fire in my eyes. Next to it was the book, my book, dog-eared, read not performatively displayed, but worn like it had mattered. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the stillness wrap around me like a blanket. This room used to be my cage. It was a monument, proof that even in the smallest, loneliest spaces, greatness can be born. I left without ceremony. No long goodbyes. No false promises. Just a nod, and on the way out, my mother touched my arm. "You don't have to forgive us," she said, "but I hope someday you'll let us earn your trust." That, I could respect. Because real redemption isn't about saying sorry once, it's about showing up differently again and again. That fall, I launched a foundation, named it the Other Sister Initiative. Its mission: to support young women from families, communities, or cultures that silence them. To give them scholarships, mentorship, a safe place to speak. The first cohort had 12 girls. Now it has hundreds, some of them write, some dance, some code, some led protests. All of them shine, and not one of them has to fight for room at the table. Because we build bigger tables now, we make space, and when people ask me what success feels like, I say, it feels like walking into a room where no one flinches at your brilliance, where being too much is exactly enough. The first time I saw my sister after the show, it wasn't planned. I was speaking at a charity gala in Chicago, black tie, dim lighting, the kind of place where success is worn like perfume. After the speech, I was mingling, shaking hands, taking photos. And then I turned. And there she was. Lauren. She wore a navy dress, elegant and understated, just like always. Her posture was straight, but her eyes were trembling. I hadn't seen her in almost 5 years. Not since the wedding. Not since the seating chart that shoved me to the kitchen corner while she sat flanked by family and photographers, basking in approval like it was a birthright. But now, under the soft glow of chandeliers, her face didn't carry pride. It carried grief. We stood there, staring. 100 thoughts collided in my head, but none escaped my lips. She stepped forward first. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said. "I came with my firm." "Didn't know you were speaking." I raised an eyebrow. "Convenient," I said, not cruelly, just honestly. She flinched, but nodded. I deserved that. There was a pause, and then, I watched everything. The show, the interviews. I read your book. Twice. My chest tightened. "Lauren, never read my poems." She said they were too sad. Now, she had read every chapter of my becoming. "I didn't understand what it was like for you," she said. "I thought you were dramatic, that you just resented me." I met her gaze. "I did resent you," I said. "But not because of who you were. Because of how you were protected from everything I had to carry alone." Her eyes welled. "I didn't know how much I benefited from that protection," she whispered. "I thought I was the good daughter. But I was just the easy one." It was strange, watching her unravel like this. All my life, she had been so composed, so curated, but now she was soft, unmasked, real. And part of me wanted to hold her. The other part wanted to ask why it took a national broadcast for her to see me. "You know," I said, "I used to count the number of times Mom said she was proud of you in a day. I stopped at 10. She winced. "How many did she say to you?" I smiled, not bitter, just tired, still waiting. Silence stretched between us, and then she said something I never expected. "I've started therapy." I blinked. "Because of you," she added. "Because you made me realize I've been living a life designed to keep me obedient, not authentic." That hit me harder than any apology, because that's the secret about golden children. They're not always lucky, they're just quieter victims. Lauren was beginning to wake up. And maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something better. We didn't hug, not that night, but we promised coffee, a conversation without cameras or conditions, and that was enough for now. In the months that followed, my relationship with my family remained complicated. There were tentative calls, a few invitations. Some I accepted, most I didn't, because healing is not a reunion, it's a boundary, and I had built mine with care. But something unexpected began to happen. They started showing up not with demands, but with questions. "Can I read something you've written? Would you help me understand what I missed? Could we come to one of your talks not as your family, but as your audience?" It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that honesty started to shift things. My mother no longer introduced me as Lauren's sister. She started saying, "This is Rachel, she's a writer. You should read her." And one day, my father, rigid, the man who once called poetry a hobby, sent me a video. It was a clip of me speaking at a youth center. He had screen recorded it. His message simply read, "I finally get it. Sometimes, that's all it takes." Not a parade, not a dramatic apology, just a quiet acknowledgement that the story has changed. That the character they once wrote off is now the author. And as for Lauren, we did have that coffee. 1. Coffee became 3. Then a monthly ritual. We didn't pretend everything was okay, but we talked about the gap, the one between her experience and mine. We filled it, piece by piece. One day, she asked if I'd help her start a book club for women in corporate leadership. Not just business books, she said, real stories. Stories that make them uncomfortable, that stretch them. I said yes. She called it The Other Chair. I laughed at the name, but I knew what she meant. For years, I sat at the table but never felt welcome. Now, we were making chairs for women who had been told they didn't belong. That's the thing about reclaiming your power, it doesn't end with you. It ripples, it disrupts legacies of silence, and one day it becomes the thing that helps your sister break free, too. There's a moment that sneaks up on you, sometime after the public applause dies down. After the cameras leave, after the book tour's slow, and the inbox finally quiets. You sit in a quiet room, alone, and you ask yourself, who am I when no one's watching now? For so long, I was fueled by proving them wrong. By climbing, rising, shedding version after version of the girl they said would never amount to much. The girl who was too sensitive, too dramatic, not like her sister. But now, I had made it. I had spoken to rooms filled with CEOs and senators. I had been named in magazines I once couldn't afford to buy. I had walked into a room where my father had to stand to greet me, and yes, he did still. That night alone with nothing but the hum of a city that finally felt like mine, I felt something deeper than triumph. I felt peace, not the kind born from victory, but from release. I no longer needed their validation. And that's when I knew I was truly free. But freedom doesn't mean forgetting, no. I remembered everything. Every offhand comment. Every invisible wound. Every holiday dinner where I was the afterthought, the backup plan. The background noise. I remembered my mother calling me difficult when I cried after being left out of Lauren's graduation speech. I remembered my father laughing when I said I wanted to major in literature. I remembered Lauren's wedding toast, where she thanked the people who shaped her without once looking at me. And still, I chose not to become what they had been to me. I chose to become what I needed. That's what the Other Sister initiative had taught me. These girls, these brilliant, overlooked, defiant girls, showed up week after week, carrying their own versions of my story. And yet, every time they read their poems or pitched their startup ideas or asked a question no one else had the courage to voice, I saw a future I never thought possible. One where being the black sheep meant being the shepherd. One where being underestimated was just camouflage for greatness. One where legacy wasn't about inheritance, it was about impact. So I expanded the foundation. We began offering writing fellowships, college prep workshops, legal aid for girls navigating family rejection due to identity or ambition. We partnered with shelters, with therapists, with schools too underfunded to offer anything beyond textbooks and lockdown drills. We created something real. Not flashy, not branded for Instagram, but real. One night, after an event in Atlanta, a young woman named Miri came up to me. She looked maybe 20. She wore her hair in a messy bun and a blazer 2 sizes too big. "Miss Powell," she said, voice shaking, "my dad said I'd never make it without him. That I'd crawl back after my first failure. But last week, my startup got funded. I came tonight to tell you, I didn't crawl back. I ran forward." I smiled. I didn't cry, though I could have. Instead, I said what I wish someone had said to me years ago. You were never broken. You were just building. There was one last thing I hadn't done. One last chapter I hadn't closed. The family reunion. It came like it always did, an email from an aunt who acted like nothing ever happened, with an attachment titled Summer BBQ 2025 and a smiley face in the subject line. Normally, I ignored it, but this time, I didn't. IRS VPD. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted truth. So I showed up alone. Again, but not afraid. The backyard was full cousins' kids, the same old picnic tables with sagging plastic cloths. Lauren was already there, helping with drinks. My parents were seated under the tent, watching the chaos unfold. People greeted me like I hadn't vanished for years. "Oh wow, Vanessa, you look amazing. I saw you on TV. What was it, CNN?" I smiled, but not too wide, and when it was time for the obligatory family circle to go around and say something you were proud of, I didn't flinch. I stood, hands steady, voice clear. "I'm Vanessa Powell. I run the Other Sister initiative. We support young women who were told they weren't enough." I guess that started because I was told the same thing. Silence. Not awkward, just thick with realization. My father shifted in his chair. My mother looked away. Lauren, bless her, smiled, warm, proud. "And I guess what I'm proud of," I continued, "is that I turned that pain into power. And then into purpose." The cousin next to me clapped first, then someone else, and eventually even my mother. Afterward, my dad came up to me. Alone. "I still don't know how to talk to you," he said. "I feel like I don't deserve to." I looked him in the eye. "Then, start by listening." And he did. That afternoon, we didn't fix everything, but we started telling the truth about what happened, about who we became, about what we lost when silence reigned, and when I left. My mother hugged me, tight, fierce, like maybe, just maybe, she finally knew what it meant to have a daughter like me. One who wasn't easy, but one who made it anyway. I used to think healing meant everything went back to how it was before the hurt, before the names I wasn't called, before the birthdays I spent alone, before the phone calls that never came. But now, I know better. Healing isn't going back. It's building forward with scars, with truth, and with the parts of yourself they told you to hide. I had spent years collecting pieces of myself, fragments they tried to shatter, soften, silence, but piece by piece, I put myself back together, and in doing so, I became someone even they couldn't ignore. About a year after the reunion, I was invited to be honored at a national leadership summit for women trailblazers. I didn't know this, but someone had nominated me anonymously. Later, I'd find out it was Lauren. She never told me herself. I only learned because one of the organizers mentioned her glowing letter of recommendation, how she had written about a sister who had taught her what courage really looked like. I cried that night, quietly, in my hotel room, with my laptop glowing beside me. She had always been the sister with the awards, the honors, the shining resume, and now, I was the one being called the reason someone else found their voice. It's funny how things turned out, how the one they tried to erase becomes the one they quote. During that summit, they asked me to speak about legacy. I stood at the podium, in front of hundreds of women in tailored suits and purposeful heels, and I said this: legacy isn't about the name they remember, it's about the lives your courage touches even if they never say thank you. I saw heads nod, but I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking to every little girl who'd been made to feel like the family embarrassment, to every woman who sat quietly at Christmas while her accomplishments were ignored, to every sibling who watched their brother or sister get praised for breathing, while they were shamed for dreaming, and to myself past and present. Because the truth is, I didn't become strong in spite of being ignored. I became strong because of it. They trained me to expect nothing, so I learned to build everything. Later that night, I got a call. It was my mom. She never called back then, unless something was wrong. So when I answered, I braced myself. But she didn't sound frantic. She sounded proud. I saw the video. She said, "The speech. You looked." She stopped. Then, "You looked like someone who doesn't need anyone's approval." I let the silence stretch. "That's because I don't," I said. "I know," she whispered. Then after a beat, "I'm sorry it took me so long to see you." That apology. It didn't undo everything, but it acknowledged everything, and sometimes, acknowledgement is the most generous form of love. Not long after that, my parents made a surprising decision. They began volunteering quietly, without one of our youth partner centers in the city. They didn't tell anyone. They just showed up, week after week, helping girls with resumes, practice interviews, small things that had once been denied to me. One day, the program director called and said, "There's a retired man and his wife here who keep showing up. I think you know them." I laughed. Yes, I did. People change. Not always, not all at once, but sometimes, enough to matter. These days, my relationship with Lauren is honest, not perfect, not performative, but real. We talk regularly, we collaborate on programs. And once a year, we go away together, no phones, no press, just sisters. The last time, we sat on a cabin porch in Oregon, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun fold behind the trees. She looked at me and said, "I used to think I was better because everything came easier to me." I didn't flinch. "I know," I said. She nodded. "But now, I think you're better because nothing ever came easy, and you still became someone I admire." We didn't hug. We didn't need to. That was the thing about us now. We didn't prove love through performances. We proved it by staying in the hard conversations, in the messy truth, in the space where neither of us had to shrink anymore. I still get messages from strangers, emails, letters, DMs. Some say, "Your story is mine." Others say, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." But my favorite message, it came from a 16-year-old girl in Wisconsin, who had been kicked out of her house for refusing to follow her family's narrow plans for her life. She wrote, "They told me I was wasting my future, that no one wanted a girl who couldn't stay quiet, but then I saw your story. And now I know, being quiet isn't the goal. Being whole is." She signed it, the other sister. And I smiled, because I knew she would be just fine, just like me. If you had told me, years ago, that one day I would become a symbol of resilience, of rising, of being enough, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't believe in myself, but because no one around me did. And sometimes, when the people who raised you treat you like background noise, you start to think your voice doesn't matter. But it does. Oh, it does. And if no one's told you lately, let me be the first. Your voice is not too loud. Your dreams are not too big. You are not too much. You are simply not meant to shrink for their comfort. In the third year of running the Other Sister initiative, we hosted our biggest conference yet. Hundreds of young women attended, many of whom had never stepped into a space where they weren't asked to apologize for existing. That day, I stood on a stage beneath a banner that read, unapologetically enough. And I looked out at a sea of women who reminded me of every version of myself. I used to hide girls who had slept in their cars just to attend. Women who had left toxic homes. Survivors, biters, visionaries in the making. I see you, I said, gripping the mic. Not because I'm special, but because I am you. There was no pretense. No performative empowerment speech. Just the truth. I spoke about sitting at kitchen tables where praise was always meant for someone else. About trying to prove my worth with straight A's, full scholarships, flawless behavior. About the slow death of becoming palatable to people who never planned to love the real me. And then I told them the story. The one you now know. The one they whispered behind my back for years. The one they dismissed. The one that made me. When I finished, the room erupted. Not in cheers, but in tears, laughter, hugs. That rare silence that only follows truth, laid bare. Afterward, one of the attendees, a woman named Zariah, came up to me and said something I'll never forget. You didn't just tell your story, you told mine. And now, I know it's not shameful to be the sister they overlooked. It's powerful. Powerful. That word rang in my chest like a church bell. But success is not armor, and healing is not linear. Even now, there are days when I hear my mother's tone in my head, or I flash back to Lauren's eyes during the worst fights, or I remember the way my father used to call me too sensitive, as if my ability to feel deeply was a defect, not a gift. These things linger. They echo, but they no longer define me, because here's what they don't tell you. Family pain doesn't go away when you get famous, or when you succeed, or when your name shows up in lights. Sometimes, it gets louder, more visible, because now they want in. Now they want to rewrite the past. Now, they say things like, we always knew you had it in you. You were always the smart one. Deep down, we just didn't know how to show it. I've learned to smile gently, to nod without agreeing, to protect my peace, because while I've opened the door to healing, I've also built a lock on my self-worth. Not everyone who hurt you deserves a front row seat in your life now, and forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes, it just means releasing yourself from their approval. Lauren and I eventually spoke at a joint panel event, a sister-to-sister conversation, moderated by a journalist from a national women's magazine. The topic was rewriting the family narrative. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't safe, it was raw. We talked about jealousy, about comparison, about what it meant to grow up in a house where love was conditional and attention was currency. Lauren said something then that cracked something open in the room. I used to think Vanessa was dramatic, that she exaggerated everything. But the truth is, she just felt everything harder because she was never allowed to feel it out loud. I looked at her, really looked. For the first time, I saw not just my sister but a mirror. A woman who had also been molded by expectations she never asked for. We were different, but we had both suffered. We just showed it in different ways. That night, we hugged in front of hundreds. And for once, it wasn't for the cameras. It was for us. One of the final questions at that event came from a teen girl in the back row. She stood up, voice trembling, and asked, "How do you know when you've finally healed?" I took a breath, and I said, "You'll know you've healed when their silence no longer feels like proof that you're unlovable." She nodded, and so did Lauren, and I knew, even if nothing else came of this, no more speeches, no more awards, no more reconciliations, I had done enough. I was enough. Always had been, even when no one else saw it, especially then. Healing was never about being perfect. It wasn't about fixing the cracks in my story, so that no one could see where the breaks had been. It was about learning to stand tall even when the floor underneath you had been shaky your whole life. It was about knowing that love can be conditional, but your worth never is. And I think the most powerful moment for me didn't come on a stage, or in front of a crowd. It came in a quiet room, with a woman who looked like me, who used to hate herself, the way I once did, and who had just found her voice. Her name was Brielle. She had joined one of our empowerment programs as part of a scholarship initiative, 17 years old, second eldest of 5. The invisible one, she told me. I do everything they ask, she said. And they never even say thank you. I sat with her in a corner of our mentorship retreat and let her talk. She told me about being the one who got her siblings to school, who cooked when her mom had to work doubles, who kept the peace between her parents, and then she said it, but it's like I don't exist unless I'm being useful, like I'm just furniture in the house. That hit me in a place I didn't know was still tender. I took her hand and said, "Brielle, Do you know what happens to girls like us when we stop trying to earn love? She shook her head wide-eyed. We become dangerous, I said. Because we stop settling. We stop shrinking. And we stop apologizing for wanting more. She didn't cry, she just breathed as if no one had ever told her that she was allowed to matter just as she was. That night, she gave the opening speech for the youth showcase. She wore bright yellow, trembling the whole time, but she did it, and after, she told me, I'm gonna be someone. Even if no one claps. God, that stayed with me. Success used to feel like revenge. A way to show them they were wrong. A way to say, look at me now, and hope their guilt would taste bitter. But that's not what success is anymore. Success is freedom. Success is being able to say no to things that used to chain you. Success is walking away from the table you were never invited to and building your own. And maybe, just maybe, one day your sister will pull up a chair. Not out of pity but out of respect. A few months after the panel event with Lauren, I received an invitation to appear on a nationally televised interview program. The producer told me, we want to spotlight women who have broken generational patterns. Not just for themselves, but for others. I paused, because that's what this was all about, wasn't it? Not just surviving the family you came from but transforming it. I accepted the invite. And this time, I invited my parents to the taping. Not because I needed them to be there, but because I was no longer afraid of being small around them. They sat in the front row, and when I walked out onto that stage, wearing a bold red suit and the kind of confidence you can't fake, I locked eyes with them. There was no bitterness in me, just clarity, just strength, just the knowledge that I had gotten here with, or without them. The host opened with Vanessa Powell, you've become a voice for every girl who was told to sit down and be quiet. What would you say to her now? I looked into the camera, imagined all the girls watching, all the invisible daughters, all the overlooked sisters, all the quiet dreamers, and I said, I would say get louder. Not because they're listening, but because you are. The studio was silent for a moment, and then applause. But I didn't need it, because the loudest thing in that room was the truth ringing in my own chest. I had spent so many years trying to be chosen, now I was choosing myself. After the interview, my mom approached me backstage. She looked tired but soft in a way she never used to. She touched my sleeve and said, I don't know how to say this, but I'm proud of who you are, not just what you've done. I looked at her, and for the first time, I believed it, not because she said it right, but because I no longer needed her to. And that is the kind of power no family can take away from you. The power of knowing your value before anyone else does. The power of loving yourself, even when they don't. The power of standing up and saying, I belong here. I always did. There's a silence that used to terrify me. The silence after speaking my truth. The kind that follows. Confessions too sharp for family dinners. Too real for photo albums. The kind that lingers after you finally say, this is what you did to me, but I've learned not to fear that silence anymore. I've made peace with it. Because sometimes, silence means they're listening. Sometimes, silence is the sound of legacy breaking. In the months after the televised interview, the emails flooded in. From women who had never spoken their pain aloud. From daughters who had stopped attending Christmas after years of passive-aggressive cruelty. From sisters who walked away from roles they were assigned and never asked for. The reliable one. The peacemaker. The afterthought. There was one message I still remember word for word. You made me realize I wasn't bitter, I was just exhausted. And now, I'm done being sorry for existing. Thank you. That one nearly broke me open. Because for so long, I thought I was bitter. That maybe they were right, maybe I was too sensitive. Too dramatic. Too much. But here's what they never told me. Bitter is what they call you when you finally name the harm they caused. Too much is what they call you when you stop playing small. And dramatic. That's just another word for inconvenient truth. I started a podcast called The Other Chair. Each episode featured stories of women who weren't invited to sit at the family table, so they built their own. There were single moms, queer daughters, estranged siblings, immigrant women, neurodivergent women, and survivors of every kind of silence. It wasn't about venting, it was about reclaiming. About saying, this happened, it shaped me, but it didn't define me. And one day, I interviewed Lauren. She had asked to come on the show herself. I want people to hear what I couldn't say when we were kids, she said. We talked about what it meant to be the golden child, how much pressure it held, how often She resented me not because I was wrong, but because I reflected everything she didn't want to face. She admitted to reading my early essays in secret, to crying when she saw the segment on national TV, to finally understanding that the pain I carried wasn't imaginary, it had simply been invisible to her. "Vanessa," she said, on air, voice shaking, "you weren't just the other sister, you were the mirror." And I didn't like what I saw because it made me question everything I'd been handed. We cried, together, not for the past, but for all the years we lost pretending it didn't matter. After that episode aired, something changed, not just with Lauren, but with me. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel grief. Grief for the girl who tried too hard. For the teen who swallowed her rage, so she wouldn't be accused of being difficult. For the young woman who achieved everything just to be noticed. I grieved the years lost, begging for scraps of praise, and then I let it go. Because grief, like healing, is not linear, but it is freeing, and when you finally make room for it, you also make room for joy. One afternoon, I received a letter, handwritten, from my father. He said he didn't deserve forgiveness, that he didn't understand what he had done until he watched me speak. Watched others see me the way he never did. He said, "You were always so bright." And I was too afraid to look at that light because it showed me my own shadows. It wasn't perfect, but it was human, and sometimes that's enough. I didn't call him back. Not right away, but I wrote him back. I told him, "Thank you for seeing me now. I'm okay. I hope you are too." It was true. I was okay, better than okay. I was whole. People often ask if I've fully reconciled with my family. Here's my answer. I've made peace, but I've also made boundaries, and both are sacred. I see them sometimes. On holidays, at family events, there are moments of softness. Now, sometimes even laughter. But the difference is I no longer walk in needing their approval. I walk in knowing who I am, and when someone tries to treat me like the old version of myself, I smile politely, and I walk away. Because growth is not measured by who accepts you now, it's measured by what you'll no longer accept, and I will never again accept being loved less because someone else needed to feel more. There's a moment that stays with me. It wasn't televised, it didn't go viral, it wasn't applauded, it happened on a Tuesday. In the middle of a coffee shop, I was reading over a grant proposal for our new mentorship center when a young woman approached me, maybe 21, with nervous hands and a hesitant smile. "Are you Vanessa Powell?" she asked. I said yes, and she sat down without waiting for permission. Her breath shaky. "You probably don't remember me. My mom used to clean your house." And just like that, I was back in that old world of quietly folded pain and invisible labor. She told me how her mother used to point to the bookshelf in our living room and say, "You see those books? That girl reads like the world's already hers." Her voice trembled. She used to say, "If someone like her can make it out, you can too." I felt a tear rise behind my eyes, but I swallowed it. Because this was everything. Not the awards, not the interviews. This to be someone's proof, to be a name passed between generations of women who refused to stay where they were put. I told her, "You don't have to make it out. You can make it through. You don't owe the world a transformation. You owe yourself the right to exist without apology." And for a moment, we just sat there, two women, two stories, two daughters of silence who chose to speak. When people look at me now, they see the polished version, the sharp clothes, the clean smile, the tidy bio, but what they don't see is the girl behind all of it. The one who flinched at kindness because it felt like a setup, the one who mistook productivity for worth, the one who thought she had to be useful to be loved. That girl still lives inside me, but now, she rests. Because I no longer need to prove anything to anyone, not to a mother who only knew how to love conditionally, not to a father whose pride had to be earned like currency, not to a sister who once looked at me like a threat instead of a partner, and definitely not to a world that only values women when they're broken, rebuilding, and beautiful all at once. I walk differently now. There's a calm in me that used to feel impossible, a steadiness that comes from not just surviving but choosing how to live. I spend most of my days mentoring girls like the one I used to be, not with motivational speeches or empty affirmations, but with presence, with listening, with truth. I tell them the things I wish someone had told me when I was 15 and sitting alone in my room while my sister played piano downstairs to thunderous applause. I tell them, "You are not the leftovers of someone else's dream. You don't have to twist yourself into the shape of their comfort. You are enough, even if no one claps." And they believe me because I believe me. Lauren and I still talk. We're not best friends, we're sisters in the most honest, raw sense of the word. We know too much about each other to pretend, but we try. We meet for lunch every other month. Talk about work, books, the state of the world, and sometimes we go quiet. Not because there's nothing to say, but because there's still so much. One time, she told me, "You know, I used to be jealous of you." I blinked, stunned. She smiled, a little sad. "You had this fire. Even when no one gave you kindling, you kept burning." I didn't understand it back then. I just felt exposed. I reached across the table and held her hand. "You don't have to be sorry," I said. And I meant it. Because forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't forgetting, it's remembering differently. Without the ache. The world still spins. People still spins. People still hurt each other. Families still fail the ones they were meant to protect. But there's power in saying, "This ends with me." Not because you're perfect, but because you're aware. Because you've seen what silence can do. And you choose to speak anyway. Because you've learned to mother yourself, to sister yourself, to love yourself in the places they left empty. And that kind of healing. That kind of rising. It echoes, it ripples, it rewrites everything. I remember once reading a quote that said, "You will be too much for some people. Those aren't your people." It stayed with me, because for so long, I tried to be just enough, just quiet enough, just polite enough, just forgettable enough, to not upset the balance of what my family had decided I was allowed to be. They called it humility. I now call it erasure. And I don't do that anymore. My last public appearance came on the anniversary of the night I was honored on national television. Same station, same host, different energy. This time, I was invited, not as a guest but as a keynote speaker. The theme, reclaiming worth. I stepped out onto that stage, not with shaky hands or a stomach full of doubt, but with a spine made of fire and decades of receipts. I looked out into that audience and said, "Let me tell you something about being invisible. It's not the same as being unworthy. They can ignore you, underestimate you, erase you from the family portrait, but they can't touch what you build in the dark." And then I paused. Let them feel that because the truth always vibrates before it lands. I continued. For anyone here who is made to sit at the kids' table long after you grew up, for anyone who clapped the loudest for others, hoping they might one day turn around and see you, for anyone who had to become their own damn cheerleader, this is your permission slip. To take up space. To be the spotlight instead of chasing it, and to stop asking small people for big love they were never taught to give. I closed with a story about my younger self, sitting on the porch, writing poems on the backs of grocery lists because no one would buy her a journal. And now, that girl is teaching millions how to write themselves back into the narrative. The audience rose, some cried, but I did and single quotes too. Not this time. This time, I smiled. Because this was not revenge. This was redemption. Lauren was there that night. So was my father. My mother sent flowers and orchid, her signature. None of them were the point, but they were part of the story. Because people can grow, and sometimes they don't, but you can. That's what matters. That's what changes everything. I took photos with guests, signed a few copies of my latest book, then quietly slipped out the back of the theater. There was no limo, no champagne, just the night air, clean and soft, like a promise I had once made to myself. One day, they'll know who you are. But more importantly, you will. And I did. I do. I keep a framed picture in my hallway now. It's not of my family. It's not even of me. It's of a quote, scrawled in my own handwriting. From years ago, it reads, "Value is not given. It is claimed. And I have claimed mine." That's the legacy I want to leave behind. Not of applause, but of awakening. Of what happens when you choose to stop auditioning for love and start living like you deserve it. Always have, always will. To anyone listening, still waiting for your moment, you don't need a camera. You don't need a stage. You just need a truth. So loud it echoes inside you. Say it, write it, live it. Because there is nothing more powerful than a person who finally believes themselves, especially when no one else ever did.